Hi guys, thank you for coming. I've talked to a few of you and it seems quite a mixed group. Everybody I spoke to was from a different country. So can I just do a survey? Anybody here born in Hong Kong? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So about slightly less than half born here. Hands up, those who are not born in Hong Kong. Been here more than 3 years. Okay. Been here more than 10 years? Okay, so mostly quite recent. Those of you who are quite new, been here 1 year? Yeah. 2 years? Right, okay, so we've got some very new people. How long have you been here, Larry?
9 years.
9 years, right, okay. And you, how long have you been here?
4 years.
4 years, right. And you guys were born here?
Yes.
Right, okay, great. I'm going to talk a little bit about science and how it interplays with our cultural backgrounds, what we might call ancient knowledge. But I'm going to start off by talking about our personal beliefs. Where do they come from? Who influenced you when you were young? I want to tell you about my Uncle Arthur, who is a very interesting person. I was a child in Sri Lanka, and in typical Asian way, instead of saying Uncle Arthur, we say Arthur Uncle. And of course he wasn't really my uncle at all. He was a fat white guy. But you know, you meet an adult and everybody says, call him uncle. So it was, hello, Arthur Uncle. Arthur Uncle was a white guy living in Sri Lanka, but he was a scientist, but he loved to write stories. So I admired him a lot, but he was a little bit crazy. And he used to say, if you throw a radio into the sky high enough, it'll never come down. And we say, but why would you do that? And he said, because then you can call the radio from different sides of the world and talk to each other. Okay, Uncle Arthur, you try it. Another thing he said was that he had a rock on his desk, which was a piece of the moon. I looked at it. It just looked like a normal rock. He also said that we only have one birthday. You're born only once, but every year you have a new orbit of the sun. So don't celebrate your birthday, celebrate your orbits. I loved Uncle Arthur because he was so crazy. You gotta love crazy guys like that. I wanted to be like him. I remember I would tell my friends, when I grow up, I'm going to write books on science. I'm going to write real science, like Arthur Uncle. Well, you know what happened? You know, the years go by, I left Sri Lanka, and I did end up as a writer. I wrote books about a lot of things. Science fiction was one of my main themes. I wrote a book about Einstein. And many years later, thanks to Facebook, I met up with I started talking to some of my old friends, and one of them said, what happened? What sort of books did you write? You said you were going to write about science. And I said, yeah, I wrote about science. And they said, no, you said you were going to write about real science. You wrote about time travel. You wrote about other dimensions. You wrote about living in the alien matrix. This is not science. This is just having fun. And I said, you know what? You'll be surprised that maybe that is science. Uncle Arthur died a few years ago at the age of 90. And a lot of the world had changed by then. And 3 things I want to mention. He wrote a letter to a magazine called Wireless World about throwing a radio into the sky and it not coming down again. That idea was adopted, and today if you look up in Wikipedia the originator of the idea for satellites is a man living in Sri Lanka called Arthur Clarke, an Englishman who lived in Sri Lanka. He was right. Now there's a little part of the sky where if you throw something, it will stay there and move with the world. And that part is now called the Clarke Belt. He was telling the truth. He had a rock on his desk that he said was part of the moon. It was part of the moon. I looked up the details from the moon landings, and one of the astronauts sent his sample of the moon to his favourite science writer, and it ended up on Arthur's desk in Sri Lanka. Arthur died aged 90, but of course he didn't say 90th birthday. He said, I've had my 90th orbit of the sun. That's pretty good, isn't it? And he passed away in Sri Lanka then. So we can see that reality, real science, sometimes comes across as hard to believe. Now, we are all from different backgrounds, different belief systems, and a lot of people today will say, no, we are scientific thinkers. We don't believe what you believe. But my message is that we really have to be more open-minded. Don't let anyone limit what you believe. Now, my books, which were criticised by my friend, time travel, other dimensions, alien matrix. Okay, are these crazy ideas? Maybe they seem like crazy ideas, but let's just look at what the science says. I've written, I think, 9 or 10 books which involve time travel. Time travel is fun, isn't it? We see it in the movies, we see it on TV, but does anyone take it seriously? In fact, there's a law in China which says you're not allowed to feature time travel in any movie because it's unscientific. And I can show you the law. It's the State Administration of Film and Media Law. And so my books cannot be distributed in China, those books for that reason. Is time travel unscientific? In 1977, scientists were very interested in a particle. Now, particles are very small things that we can't see that scientists get very excited about. This particular particle was interesting because it was very short-lived. It was born and then disappeared very quickly. The lifespan was 2 nanoseconds, but just think of it as a short time, okay? Think of it as 2 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever you need to. It was born and died. Now, there was only one place where these particles could be born. That was above the Clarke Belt. It was at the edge of the atmosphere. And so scientists said, we can send up satellites to look at them, but we'll never find them on Earth. And then the scientists took a particle detector, which is just a small box about this big, and went outside just to see if there were any on Earth. Bing! It registered one. Walked around a bit more, bing! Another one. He said, there are muon particles on Earth. And the other scientists say, no, muon particles are born in the stratosphere and live for a very short length of time. They could never travel to Earth. And other scientists got muon particle detectors and went outside and they all found them. You can today go and buy a muon particle detector, and many schools have them, and find these particles. How can they be born up there and appear down here when they disappear so quickly? The explanation is they travel through time. scientists discovered that muon particles move at almost exactly the speed of light, 99% of the speed of light. And what happens if you move at that speed? You distort time. These particles are time travelers. They are born and then they travel through time to arrive on Earth before they die. This is a simple experiment that we can do ourselves. You can do it with your school children to show time travel. Time travel, I'm sorry to tell the Chinese government, is not unscientific. Time travel happens every day. Other dimensions. Okay, other dimensions. Has anybody heard of a famous researcher called Joseph Campbell? Joseph Campbell is some of you have heard of him. He's a world famous expert on mythology. He's studied all the religions. He's been all around the world studying the most ancient stories, and he's very famous. He's had many TV series and many books. He said that after studying all the religions and all the ancient books of the world, he said they have a clear, simple theme. It says that there's another plane of existence that we need to be aware of. Now, I was quite interested when this came out. This was in the, well, he's dead now, but it came out in the 70s and 80s. Do you know what the oldest definition of spirituality is? It's one that different religions share, and it's just 8 words long, and it goes like this. As inside, so outside. As above, so below. And we find this 8-word concept in all the different faiths. We find it in different words. For example, on earth as it is in heaven. We find different wording, but the same concept. As inside, so outside. As above, so below. Clearly Joseph Campbell fitted into that. He said, okay, there's another place, another plane. Now, over the last 50 or 60 years, quantum physics has risen to become the main branch of science. Quantum physics first appeared in 1927 and was dismissed by most scientists, including Einstein, who thought it was a terrible idea. But bit by bit, the scientists came round to it. Einstein and Niels Bohr was the scientist who developed it. He and Einstein fought for decades over it. And every single argument, Niels Bohr won. Now, if you can imagine an unknown person having an argument with Einstein about science and winning every single time, you know, okay, there's something special here. Today, Einstein's theory of relativity is considered maybe the second most important discovery of the last 100 years. The first is quantum physics. Quantum physics powers your telephone. It powers the internet. It powers all modern technology. It's important. It also is used for things like GPS and sat-nav. Most technology now uses quantum physics. What does quantum physics say? There are 2 principles in quantum physics, and one is that consciousness controls physical reality. This is what Einstein found difficult to understand. He said, it sounds quite religious, and that really annoyed him. Why? Because Einstein was a religious man and Niels Bohr was an atheist. He said, now you're telling me that consciousness controls reality? But Niels Bohr did a long series of experiments to show how it worked. And the simplest one went like this. You took a machine which fired a photon across the room. And the photon would hit the wall and make a little mark. Very simple. Now you do it again, but you leave the room. When you do it without watching, the photon doesn't leave a mark on the wall, it leaves a splat. Why would it leave a splat? It was one photon, one particle. And so I said, what does that mean? Niels Bohr explained that physical objects don't exist until they're consciously measured. They are just clouds of possibilities. And a cloud makes a splat. An object makes a mark. The experiment was extraordinary. So it was repeated. It was repeated at least 1,000 times. And every time it got the exact same result. When there was nobody watching, an object, it could be a photon, it could be an electron, it could be a bigger particle, went splat. And when people were watching, it went dink. So let me bring you right up to date with the latest version of this. About maybe 2 months ago, a scientist made a little ball out of rubidium molecules, rubidium atoms. It was a tiny little ball, and he put it into a chamber so no one could see it. And he turned on the electricity in the chamber, and the ball started to float. Now he chose this material, rubidium, because rubidium can be returned to its quantum state very easily. And so he turned it on and the rubidium floated up. Now he knew it was in there, but he couldn't see it. What happened? The rubidium stopped being a ball of rubidium and started being at least 2 different balls of rubidium, because no conscious mind was watching it. Then he turned the machine off. Down fell the ball of rubidium. And it was one ball, but he had placed a detector at the place where it landed, and the detector showed that 2 separate balls had fallen 54 centimeters apart and combined into one at the moment that humans detected them. Okay, so quantum physics, the first thing it teaches us is that the conscious mind makes reality. There's no reality without the conscious mind. Particles are just splats before we perceive them. And once we perceive them, they become what they are supposed to be. You can see why scientists found it so hard to accept quantum physics. It's basically the spiritual idea that inside, as inside, so outside. The inner controls the outer. The inside consciousness controls the outside reality. It's a idea. When they traced it back and tried to look who actually had the earliest, who actually said this first, and they found a crazy bishop in Ireland had written something that people were puzzled about for many years. He wrote, "If a tree falls in the forest and no one sees it, does it make a noise?" And that phrase became famous, and now that crazy Irish bishop is in the quantum physics textbook, because he was right, that tree doesn't make a noise.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
If the conscious mind make reality, then like the situation when the Syrian boys in Syria, the bombs hit them and they got killed like 3 years old, 4 year olds. So then how to explain about this? Their consciousness make them killed?
Yeah. No, this is it's not about making their things happen to them. It's about physical objects. It's about matter. It's about atoms. So, so what quantum physics teaches us is that there is no physical objects, without consciousness. Consciousness is the basis of reality, and once we have physical objects, we must have consciousness. You can see why scientists were reluctant to accept this, because in science, consciousness has only been around for a little while. What was there before consciousness? What was there before humans? What other consciousness was there? Okay, you can see it's a puzzle, isn't it? It's a puzzle.
Maybe you don't understand my question.
Yeah.
The physical object is the bomb.
Yeah, yeah.
The consciousness is the kids.
No, no, the physical object is made not by the kids.
No, the physical object is the bomb. You know,
Yeah,
the
but,
bomb.
but who made the bomb?
Who made the military?
Right, right. So they are conscious and they make objects out of matter.
And the kids, they got killed.
Yeah.
You say the consciousness make reality, then the kids, they got killed because the bomb dropped
Right,
and killed them.
right.
So, is it related? The kids' consciousness and the physical objects, the bomb.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that you make what happens to you happen. That's called solipsism, where you control everything by yourself. You can look it up. It's a very interesting theory, solipsism. But that's not the same really as quantum physics. Quantum physics is really the nature of matter. So this is made out of molecules. Molecules is made out of atoms. Atoms are made out of a nucleus and a covering electron. The nucleus is made out of a proton. The proton is made out of quarks. Quarks are made out of ideas. Heisenberg, the father of quantum physics, said matter is made out of ideas. Now, this Heisenberg is not some religious nut. Heisenberg is one of the most respected scientists in history. Matter is made out of ideas. Okay. So that's one theme of quantum physics. The other theme is that there is another dimension behind this one. So the second part of our religious thing was as inside, so outside, as above, so below. Okay, so religion tells us there is another place. Quantum physics proves that there is another place. And again, it's a quantum physics experiment that has been done 100 times, but let me bring you right back up to date. Does anybody know what the speed of light is?
186,000 miles a second.
Very good. Speed of light is 186,000 miles a second. In fact, that's not actually the speed of light as such. That's the speed of reality. Nothing can happen faster than that. It's not quite the same thing. What would happen if the sun exploded right now? Nothing. We would all just keep on talking. We would not notice.
We got 8 minutes, right?
Very good. In exactly just over 8 minutes, we would notice, because we would all die. The speed of reality is 8 minutes. The speed of this reality is 186,000 miles per second, 299,000 kilometers per second. That's the speed of reality. Nothing can happen faster than the speed of reality. Now, Einstein was one of the people who worked on this problem, so he was very happy about this, the speed of reality, until Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg came along with quantum physics, and they said, no, there's a quantum dimension. Watch this. If you take a particle and separate them, quantum particles, and spin one, the other will spin as well. And so Einstein said the particles are communicating in some way. And so the scientists said, okay, we'll move them further apart. And they've moved them further and further apart. And the most recent experiment was about 3.5 months ago in Europe, in Holland. They took some particles and they put them on the other side of a city. And so in between there were cars and houses and taxis and buses and humans. And they put the particles very far apart. And they worked out how long the signal would take to get to the other particle at the fastest speed possible, which is the speed of reality, 186,000 miles per second. And they have very precise measurements for this. You can work it out very precisely. And I don't have the exact figure in my head, but it was 0.47692345 nanoseconds. Whatever it was a very precise figure. And then they did the experiment. They spun one and the other spun. And they looked at the speed and it was 0.00000. It was simultaneous. This reality, nothing can happen faster than 186,000 miles per second. That's the speed limit of reality. So the scientists said, those particles are quantum particles. They're divided by a city in this reality, but there's another reality where they're next to each other. There's another reality where space, distance, is meaningless and time is meaningless. Okay, now just think about that phrase. Does that sound like science people talking, or does that sound like religious people talking? It was science people talking. Were these religious scientists? No, they were atheists. Okay, so it's very clear that there is another level of reality. If you go to your school children's science textbook, look up quantum physics, it will say there is an invisible plane of reality in addition to the physical reality we see. That's a standard principle of quantum physics today. Okay, so religion tells us as inside, so outside, as above, so below. And quantum physics tells us exactly the same thing. Okay, so why do people talk about the gulf between science and religion? In fact, I don't think it exists. One of the reasons why there's this confusion, I think, is that the word scientist is so broad that any technician can call themselves a scientist. Every doctor can call themselves a scientist. Whereas the people who are actually looking at the nature of reality, these are theoretical physicists. And we find that generally they are not hostile to religion for very obvious reasons. Okay, I think I did enough talking. Would anybody like to ask?